You stood outside my grave with tears still on your face. I heard you say my name. My night was turned to day.
Lazarus, come forth.
So I don't know how close you were paying attention to the video, but I did not know Jesus was British. Did y'all know that? I know, it's crazy, right? Lazarus, come out, mate. I thought that was interesting. Make sure you share that with people, that what you learned at church yesterday was that. So one of the things that I want to share with you before we get too far into the series, which I am going to be continuing, this Wednesday is First Wednesday, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different because of winter descending upon us. We're going to have kind of a soup theme, so if you want to bring a soup or chili to that when you join us, please bring that. That's what we're going to be doing. If you're still not big on the whole buffet thing yet, that's fine. Feel free to brown bag it. You can bring your own thing, and no one's going to judge you for that. So please, if you do, we do this the first Wednesday of every month. It's at 7 p.m. Steve speaks a little bit. People get baptized. We have communion together. And so it's just a good time for us to sit together and fellowship and just have a good time. So if you haven't been to one yet, I hope you'll make it out. It's just a really good time to get together, okay? But we are going to continue our series on Lazarus. And what we're doing, Steve and I, is basically we're looking at the perspectives of different people in that story. And the person that I want to focus on today is Martha. And Martha is rather unique in that you can tell from just the 2 or 3 stories about her in the Bible is that she is a type A personality. She is somebody that wants to get things done. And we don't always get that perspective. Sometimes there are people that are mentioned in the Bible and we don't even know what they've said. But with her, it's very easy to see what it is with her personality. And that she's task-oriented. She wants to get stuff taken care of. And I know a little bit about that because I married one of those, and she is very task-oriented. And I knew this when we were dating. I knew this when we were getting married. I knew this all along, but it really came to head one day when we were hiking at Urari National Park. Now, I don't know, and we were on a trail called the Dutchman's Creek Trail. Now, if you've never been on that trail, let me tell you, don't. It is the most boring, poorly marked trail, and there's nothing to see. It's like a Christopher Nolan movie. There's direction of some kind, but there's just a lot of unnecessary confusion. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's just crazy. And so basically we get together, we're at the trailhead, and we say, we're going to go this far. Sound good? Sounds good. And I've got a book with a map in it. And about a couple hours in, something's not right. I realize that there's something wrong with this map or my directions or something, and I say, I think we need to play it safe and turn back. To which my type A personality wife says, yeah, we could do that if we were giant pansies. And we begin to argue over whether or not we should keep going or go back. And that's where our personalities were really just, you could just kind of see it. And so we're going back and forth over this. And I'm just like, listen, I think, what you called not giving up. She saw it as just giving up. I saw it as not dying. And I said, I think we need to keep going. She's like, come on, beta male, let's do this. And I'm just like, oh God. And I'm like, fine, let's just go. And we're just both arguing loud enough for all the animals to know where their next meal is. Obviously, I would not be telling you this story if I wasn't right. So, it's about 7 o'clock in the evening. We have no flashlight. It's getting dark. I have an old flip phone because this is an old story. And the phone is dying, and there's barely a signal. And so finally, I get out a message, but I know, and they're like, what? And I know that it's not enough for them to just, know what we're doing or where we're, or I mean, I couldn't give, I was like, oh, my, longitude and latitude, I don't know any of, I'm not military, I don't know any of that stuff. So, but apparently a message gets out just enough so that a park ranger comes out and finds us. And every now and again, because by this point, Angie's had what we call a change of heart. And every now and again, she'll say, well, I think we should just do it. And I'll go, Rory! And I'll just kind of throw that out, and we just kind of calm down. But that's the kind of personality that we're talking about. Some like to play it safe. That's me. I overthink things. That's my shtick. I tend to put too much thinking into things that sometimes I want to kind of make sure all the variables are considered. And Angie's just like, just go, And so that's Martha. She's like, there's a task, it needs to be done, it needs to be taken care of. And so that's how she operates. And we see this come to head when she is waiting for Jesus. And waiting, and waiting, and waiting. And he doesn't show. And one of the things that, because I spoke on this passage, but I spoke on the whole thing. I did a series in the summer on suffering. And on this one, and you're going to hear a couple of things that I said in that series. But what we're going to focus mostly on is Martha. And one of the things that I mentioned, because we've all been there, where there's been a crisis, and we wanted God to step in, and we wanted him to do something. And one of the things that I said is that before the crisis hits and we know how God operates, we know all the theology. But when there's a tragedy, it's no longer a theological problem. It's a relationship problem. And how many times have we seen where Lois Lane gets in trouble, she's tied to the front of a train or something, and it's about to go off a bridge, and Superman comes in, swoops in, grabs her at the last minute, and they fly off. And that's what they expected Jesus to do. That's exactly what was expected, that he would come in and he would save the day. I want to read to you this passage that focuses on Martha specifically, and it starts at John 11, verse 17. If you look in your bulletin, you'll see some notes there. You can also go online, see our notes there. But I want to start specifically with her interaction with him and what it was that Jesus was trying to do there, okay? So it says this. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. And there's Martha, just diving ahead. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. If you've been following Steve's teachings on this, you know that word was sent to Jesus. Lazarus, this guy you really like, and you like his family, he's sick. You need to come back. Or just do your Messiah thing from over there. We've seen you do that. Just heal at a distance. Just do something. And he doesn't reply. He doesn't come back. All they get is radio silence. And now he's come back. And so we see Martha coming out saying, if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. And we see this wrestling taking place inside her own head, right there in front of him. If you had been here, you would have saved him, but I know that you're the Messiah. So one of the things that I want to share with you, and there's just a few points I want to share with you this morning. And the first one is simply this. Like many of us, Martha's faith had room to grow. Like many of us, Martha's faith had room to grow. I don't think there's a single person that I've found that encounters Jesus and fully understands what he's up to. Everybody was kind of missing the boat. They were always a little bit shy. They kind of figured it out. Sometimes they gave a right answer, and he's like, yeah, that's it. But for the most part, there were many people that they didn't completely comprehend what was going on or what he was up to. And it was always a little bit of a mystery. And we see the exact same thing here. She does not fully comprehend what is taking place. And here's the interesting thing, though. Her faith was really solid, wasn't it? I mean, she recognizes Jesus as the Son of God. She knows that he should be the leader of her life. That he is the one that you go to for forgiveness of sins. She had, if you came to me and said, okay, so what are like the bare minimums? What are the things that a person needs in order to be a Christian, to be a follower of Christ? Her answer is that. She knows exactly what it means to live as a follower of Jesus. So why not just leave her alone? Why not just let her live her life? Why not just go about doing the things that a Christian should do? And a big part of it is that God loves us enough to meet us where we are at, but too much to leave us there. Every single time Jesus interacts with people, there's a nudge, there's a push, there's a poke, there's a rubbing of a sore spot that makes them build their faith. There's a very interesting verse throughout the Gospels where it says, and the disciples put their faith in him. And very often it happens over many times, and what you see is that he would perform a miracle, and it says, and they put their faith in him. And what that is communicating is simply this. Their faith, every time it says that, was increased. There's a new dynamic about Jesus that they didn't quite understand. That light would be shed upon, and then that faith would grow. So we know that she believes in Jesus, and she believes in his lordship, but it wasn't fully there. Because here's what happens later. So Jesus, there's some more interactions. He walks over to the tomb. There's a stone, okay? And basically he says, move the stone away. In fact, in verse 39, it says this, take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, y'all remember her, right? By this time, there is a bad odor, for he has been in there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So she believed in his lordship. She believed in his authority mostly, for the most part. I don't know about you, but my favorite kind of advice is unsolicited advice. The advice that you don't ask for. And Jesus got it all the time. There were so many people, often his own family, telling him, okay, when you do the Messiah thing, I really think this is how you should go about it. And there were so many people telling him how he should do what it was that he did. And Martha was no different. And you see that type A personality. Very often, the type A personality, they have just a lot of advice to give, whether you ask for it or not. And so very often you kind of have to, you just kind of see that, and you see that here, okay? You see how she comes in, and Martha wasn't the only one. Peter did it, his own family did it, where they come in, and you can kind of see where she's saying, well, if you're going to do that, here's how you should be doing it. And Jesus is just like, do you remember that conversation we had that one time 30 seconds ago where you told me I was the Son of God? If you just believe, you will see. And then, of course, he calls Lazarus out of the grave. And there's this point where you see where he is rubbing raw that spot of growing that faith. Because she was so focused on the task, on the checkbox that needed to be checked, on the thing that needed to be done, that the relationship was kind of put off to the side. It wasn't completely understood. And that's where he's really trying to help, not just her, but everyone there. That you need to really to understand who I am. It's not just about doing stuff. There are times where doing stuff is really important, okay? Many of you are familiar with the parable of the talents. The guy gives each of them a certain number of talents. He goes away. He says, take these, make me a profit. He goes away. He comes back, and he asks one question. Just one. Did you do what I asked you to do? So doing is a part of the Christian life and the Christian faith. But I believe it begins by knowing who Jesus is. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He's saying that you need to understand who I am. You've kind of got it, but there's more for you to understand. So just like all of us, her faith needed to be stretched. And before we condemn Martha too much, or Peter or his family, for telling Jesus what to do we not do the exact same thing? How many of you have prayed, and I'm not talking about asking God for stuff, but we tell God, here's what I really think would be best. You ever prayed that prayer? I have. I've prayed it many a time. And so very often we have to realize that faith isn't God fulfilling our plans. Okay? But we'll get to more of that in a moment. The second thing I want to point out is this. Difficulties are the catalyst for stretching faith. Difficulties are the catalyst for stretching our faith. You know, there was an article that came out not too long ago, and I'm kind of a movie buff, kind of not. I don't watch a lot of foreign films or, that kind of stuff. But I enjoy good movies. And there was a list of movies that was recently published of, it's like 100 movies with the best ending. The 100 best movies with the best movie ending. And I didn't agree with all of them, but a lot of them I did agree with, because for me, I will not watch a movie, or, here's a big one, watch a television show unless I know it's going to end well. If it gets all convoluted, if it gets too confusing, there's too many loose ends. Do y'all remember the TV show Lost? Very appropriate title. It just got so weird, and I've never watched a single episode. Because as they got farther and farther in, it just got more crazy and convoluted and just weird. And so I've never watched it. If you want to come to me afterwards and tell me all of the great things about the TV show Lost, don't. I'm not taking any TV or movie recommendations right now. So but that's because for me, and it doesn't have to, I prefer a happy ending, but it doesn't have to be. But my biggest thing is all the loose ends need to be tied up. Almost a little bit too neat is my preference. I want everything tied up exactly the way that it should be. And the reason that I like that is because life has too many loose ends already. Does it not? There are so many things where we just, it's a relationship or something we did, did we do that right? Did we do it wrong? Is that person mad at me? Do they even care? Or they think, what's that, should I have done that differently? Could I have done it better? I don't know. Am I where I'm supposed to be in life? Or am I? I mean, there's just so many of these dangling threads that I have enough of that already. So if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch your TV show, you better tie it together. Otherwise, I'm just going to, I'm going to watch cartoons or something. Because there's enough of that in life. And that's the difficult thing very often when it comes to our faith in Christ. There are times where he doesn't call the guy out of the grave. He doesn't tie up the loose ends. And we have to still put our faith in him that he knows what he's doing. He doesn't show us what the effect will be. And that's really hard. If you don't believe me, just talk to somebody who has some kind of illness, some kind of ache, and they've been to the doctor, 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 and the doctors don't know what it is. You'd almost rather hear some horrible diagnosis than just, the shrugging of shoulders. And when these difficulties come into our lives, there's going to be, faith is rubbed in such a way so that there is this mental wrestling. I wish I could tell you that, as you get older, the longer you're a Christian, you make sure you come in here and you sit in a chair and you go to church and you read your Bible, that God's just going to sprinkle you with this fairy dust that increases your faith, and that's not the way it works. There's a mental wrestling that takes place where you take a look at what God promises, what he says, as you interpret the Bible correctly, and then you look at life, and somehow they don't connect. And there's a wrestling that takes place there as we grow in that understanding and try to get those pieces to fit. There's a Psalm 22, where we see the writer go back and forth about what's going on in his life and his trust in Jesus. And there's this flip-flop throughout the entire thing as you see him wrestle with the faith that he knows that he's supposed to put in God. In verse 1, it says this, my God, why have you forsaken me? Verse 3, yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. That word enthroned is very important. The idea that God is in heaven on his throne, that communicates control. That communicates authority. That communicates he's got this, even though we don't feel like he does. Then in verse 6, but I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by people. Verse 9, yet you brought me out of the womb, meaning I am here because you created me. Verse 11, do not be far from me, for trouble is near. Verse 19, you are my strength, come quickly to help me. And you just see him go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the fact that faith is pursued through this mental wrestling and not some effortless delivery is really kind of it's a bitter pill to swallow. Because we were just again, we have that kind of vending machine mentality. Well, I go to church, I read my Bible, I pray usually, so can I just have it? Can I just get that faith? Can't you just give it to me? Can it just be sprinkled on me? And that's not the way it works. Because there is this relationship aspect. I talked about Angie and I and our that hike through Uwari. I'm serious. Write that trail down. Dutchman's Creek Trail. Don't go there. They should call it the divorce maker. Just don't do it. And as we, were dating, and engaged and married and then living as a married couple, there's, all of these chores that need to be done. There's all these things that need to be taken care of. There's all these plans that you need to make. You need to get your finances together. You need to make sure, who's going to do the dishes? And I'll do it. And then, who's going to do laundry? Okay, I'll take care of that. And then all these other kind of things. But a lot of it is just this building of a relationship and understanding one another and getting to know one another. Remember your first year of marriage? You almost killed one another. You remember that? And it's because of just the getting to know each other and that wrestling and knowing where each of you stands. One of the things that I tell people, they'll come in and sometimes they'll get a little advice about marriage, and I say this almost every single time. You have to talk to one another about how you talk to one another. You have to talk to one another about how you talk to one another. Sometimes I'll be trying to make a joke. It's not well received, like we'll be around other people. And my wife will kind of reach over and take her hand and just set it on my knee, which is her way of saying, "You're hilarious. Keep this going." That's not what it means. And so there's just all of these things as you build that relationship and you get to know one another. It's the same thing with you and God. I mentioned how Martha, we see her as being a very type A personality. And Jesus ministers to her and talks to her in keeping with her personality. He meets her where she is. And she has a unique relationship with him, just like every single one of us. He knows your personality because he designed you that way, and he's going to meet you there. And how we interact with him it really is. It's different for each one of us. I believe that he speaks to each one of us differently. I believe that he calls us to different things, and I think he's made each one of us in a unique way. And so he is going to meet you there. But it is a relationship, and we must learn to understand to a greater degree who he is. He already knows us, but we must understand who he is and how he's going to interact with us. And it's during difficulties that happens most often. Because when things aren't going right, that's when we really dive into, okay, who is this God that I believe in? And that's really where, honestly, a lot of teaching takes place. The third thing I want to share with you is this. Faith is an aspect of relationship, and so stretching one stretches the other. Martha really did have a little bit of a vending machine mentality. Jesus, I know him. He's powerful enough to heal. He likes me. He loves me. And 1 + 1 = 2, 2 being he's going to come over and he's going to heal Lazarus, and that's going to be it. And we see that Martha had just, again, she was very task-oriented, but didn't really focus on the relationship very well. In fact, we see that from the very beginning. Another story that we see, and this happens before Lazarus, okay, is in Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42. And this isn't in your notes, so I'm just going to read this to you real quickly. It says this: As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one." And he's referring to himself at that point. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Here's the interesting thing about that verse of Scripture. I've been a pastor for many, many years. I've done a lot of Bible studies, and I've done Bible studies on this very passage. And every time I do a study on that passage, there is at least one person who takes Martha's side over Jesus. Every time. And I'm stunned every time. I'm like, this is Jesus that said this, right? Not just some random guy. Well, the house needed to be, I'm sure there was some dusting that needed to be done. There's a lot of, I'm just like, are you kidding? And I see it almost every time. And there's something, and it's one of those things where I almost don't know how to respond. Because they have a task-oriented view as opposed to that relationship. He even says, what Mary is doing, this is the better thing. These things, that the house will be dirty again tomorrow. But this is permanent. What I am teaching her, what I'm instructing her, that's the more important thing. And when life is out of control, when we can't do the things that we would like to do, when there's literally nothing that we can, there's no task to be done. There's just this situation where we cannot, there's no control, there's no influence, there's no way to even just act. And we're just left to just try and figure things out. We'll go to God and we'll go to prayer and we'll just, and we kind of wonder, what is faith? Sometimes, and you have my permission to ignore these people, they will come to you and say, well, your faith just isn't strong enough. Please tell those people to go away if they ever come to you and tell you that. Faith isn't something that you just have. Faith isn't squinting your eyes and just believing extra hard, okay? There's a great quote here. He says it in relation to prayer, but it really is in relation to life. He says this, and I've got the quote up here on the screen. It says, God does not want us simply to toss requests at him, hoping that some of them will be answered. Have we done that? Well, gee, I hope these stick. I really like to see this to happen, so, I just throw those out there. He wants us to ask, knowing that he is there, claiming what he promises, trusting that he will act in line with his nature, and that his purposes will be achieved. That is praying in faith. One of the things that's very difficult in that relationship, in that building of faith, is realizing that God's answers are wiser than our requests. And here's where it gets really difficult. When we pray and we hear nothing and we see nothing, we also have to come to terms with the fact that God's silence is wiser than our requests. God is going to do what he knows is best. I don't know if you're going to relate to this illustration at all, but there's a movie. It was actually on that list of movies with best endings. It's from a long time ago, and it's called American Graffiti. It was nominated for Best Picture, and it's about a group of high school kids in the early 1960s where being cool meant slicking your hair over and polishing the chrome on your car. And it's the last day of summer, and they're going to have one more last blowout night of partying, okay? And the next day, they're all going their separate ways. And every one of them has plans. One guy's going to go to college, one guy's going to do this, one guy's going to do another thing, one guy has no plan at all. And here's what is amazing about how that movie ends. Every single person, every single character, because there's a huge cast of characters, every character in that movie gets what he needs. Very few of them get what they want. But all of them got what they need. And as you see who they are and what they put their values in and what their thinking is, you see what it is that these things that happen at the end is what they needed. One guy wrecks his car. One guy tries to get the girl and can't. One guy wants to break up with the girl and then changes his mind. And then one guy, he decides, yeah, I'm going to go to college. And the next day he gets on a plane and he goes to college. And all of those situations, there were these really just fascinating endings to them. But every single one of them got what they needed and not what they wanted. So anyway, American Graffiti, if you're a movie buff, look it up. It's from when I was growing up back in the 1800s. So I guess that's an old movie. But there's going to be this constant push in your life. God loves you enough to start where you are, loves you too much to leave you where you are. Because this is really kind of his goal for you. There's in Colossians 1, starting verse 9, he says this, and this is a goal for you, it's for me, for everyone. And there are times where I take this verse and I will turn it into a prayer, and I pray it over my kids, I pray it over my wife, I pray it over myself. It says this, for this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption through forgiveness of sins. That is what he wants for each one of us. And like I said, very often, difficulties are the catalyst for that change. Somebody, I don't know who, it's an anonymous quote, but he basically said that desperate times cultivate an understanding of life. Desperate times cultivate an understanding of life. And if you don't believe that, just go to a funeral and listen to the conversations. It is during times like that that a very real door is opened. What is life? What happens when it ends? Where do we go? Who is in charge of this entire thing anyway? And that's why whenever I have the opportunity, because that's how I see it, to preach a funeral, I always preach the salvation of Jesus Christ, every single time. I believe that it is key to understanding this world we live in. Ask anyone, I am a brutal realist. That's why when I said a moment ago that how God's silence is wiser than our requests, so many times I hear people say, God, he always answers prayers. Sometimes he says yes, and sometimes he says no, and then sometimes he says no. 95% of the time, he says nothing. Stop trying to speak on his behalf. He's not saying anything. I am a brutal realist. And that's where I realized that, no, he's not saying anything, but he's still God, and his silence is wiser than my request. I don't know what you may or may not be going through right now. When I did the series on suffering back in the summer, there was a lady that lost her best friend. There was an older couple that lost their daughter. There were so many things going on. There was cancer. It just seemed like it all descended. And time has not changed that. Everyone here is going through something. Could be small. Could be one more small thing after a bunch of small things that's really getting underneath your skin. Could be one very huge thing. But if there's anything that I could leave you with, it is to lean on Jesus. There is something about that. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. There'll be times where let me tell you, there would be days where you've done enough where you just say, Lord, I have no idea what is going on, but if you can just help me trust you today. And you get to that spot, and you have done plenty. Because that's what God wants. He wants us to put our faith in him, in that he is who he says he is. In closing, I want to remind you that we have our stations. We have a communion station. We have one here, and we have one in the back over there. If you'd like to take part in communion. If you want to spend some time in prayer at the cross, please feel free to do so. We also, every week, we offer our blue bag. In here, there's just some things where, basically, if you pick one of these up, somebody will come along, and they will explain to you in very simple terms what it means to be a follower of Christ. There's some there, and there's some there. We usually have them in the back, but there's some right over there as well, okay? So you pick one of these up, somebody will come alongside, and they'll unpack this with you. They'll take about 8 minutes and explain to you in very simple terms what it means to be a follower of Christ. Also, if you're new here, I want you to know that, and you're just kind of looking for that first step, you don't know how to get plugged in, please contact Steve at Spout Springs, steve@spoutsprings.org, and what we do is basically just an orientation chat. We kind of tell you about our church. We tell you about how you can get plugged in. We tell you how, basically, what it means to just kind of figure out how God has designed you, and we just kind of show you the way of how to get involved in a church, and not just this one, but really any of them. And so we hope that if you're looking for a next step, that you'll take a look at that as well. All right. But I've been through that situation where I've had a person and they're just going through something really, really difficult, and I don't know how to speak into it. Just yesterday, I was holding my phone and just trying to craft a text for this little girl that my family knows and love to death, and she's going through something really difficult right now, and just trying to figure out how to convey some kind of message without me personally feeling dumb and impotent and just completely ineffective. It's hard, I get it. But I promise you, while it may not seem so, God is there. He is walking with you in this. And if I could just offer you one bit of advice, is to ask yourself, how do I make sure that I'm keeping my faith in him? It may be small, it may be difficult, but how do I put my faith in that God is who he says he is, even in this?